Hello all, we're just going to have a fairly brief lecture here to talk a little bit more about where in the skeletal system you have cartilage tissues, and those are called skeletal cartilages. So we've heard about the basic structure of the bones of the body, but what about a little bit more about these cartilages? Because cartilage is not bony tissue, it's a completely different type of tissue. So one thing that contrasts with bone is that your skeletal cartilages don't have blood vessels or nerves. No blood vessels or nerves. So that winds up being important for things like healing. If you don't have a blood supply, a tissue, you have cells inside your cartilage. Remember those chondrocytes from back in chapter 4 when we were learning about those. But they actually have to rely on diffusion of oxygen gas and nutrients from blood vessels in the surrounding covering of the cartilages. So because of that, their metabolism, they're not able to do cellular respiration as quickly as cells that have a good blood supply. So since those chondrocytes in the cartilage, if you remember what they look like, that's a little hunk of cartilage. The cells are sitting in there in those little chambers that we call lacunae, and they kind of look like eyeballs sitting inside there. The blood supply for cartilage actually comes from out in here. You have a connective tissue covering called the perichondrium, kind of like you have the periosteum around bones. The perichondrium is the connective tissue covering, a dense connective tissue covering around cartilage. So that's where your blood supply is. So oxygen gas and nutrients has to diffuse through that semi-solid extracellular matrix of the cartilage to get to those cells. So those cells are kind of slow. These cells, they make the semi-solid extracellular matrix of cartilage. They have to produce all of the substances in there. So when you have an injured cartilage, it's just not going to heal that well because you don't have a good blood supply. All right, so again, you do have a perichondrium around these cartilages, and just like you have a periosteum around bones, and that is the site of the blood vessels that will supply nutrients and so forth to your chondrocytes, the cells within that cartilage. Just a quick review from chapter 4, your different types of cartilages that we have in the body. Hyaline cartilage is the major type, and it provides some support, flexibility, resilience to the ends of the bones. Imagine if at your joints you had bone coming into close contact with bone, two hard bones rubbing up against each other. That would not be too good for your skeletal system health. So hyaline cartilages, because they're a little squishier, they contain more fluid than osseous bone tissue does. That helps provide some resilience there. And hyaline cartilages are the most abundant type. You have those on the ends of your long bones, as we've seen. Then you have the elastic cartilages, and those are similar to hyaline cartilage, but they have more elastic fibers. So like in the pinna of the ear, if you remember, that consists of elastic cartilage, and it rebounds very quickly. It's very elastic due to the elastic fibers that are located there. Then you have fibrocartilages, like at the pubic symphysis. You'll be learning about that as you go through the skeletal system anatomy, and also the padding, the pads in between, or the discs in between your vertebrae along the back consist of fibrocartilages that have a lot of collagen fibers in them, so they have very good tensile strength. They don't get pulled apart very easily. And this diagram from your textbook, just a pretty nice one. It shades for you, highlights where you have these different kinds of cartilage in the body. So the things highlighted in blue there are your hyaline cartilages. So in addition to being on the ends of your long bones, also your rib or your costal cartilages are hyaline cartilage. The cartilages of your nose are hyaline cartilage as well. Elastic cartilage, you have that in your ears, and then your fibrocartilages, again at the pubic symphysis. That is a cartilage pad between your two pelvic bones, and then also in your intervertebral discs as well. Then you have a third location, which when we cover the knee joint in a little bit more detail, for Chapter 8, you have some fibrocartilage pads down in there in between your femur and your tibia at the knee joint. Each of those is called a meniscus, and that helps provide some extra cushioning for the knee joint, which is not a surprise because you imagine your knee joint has to bear a lot of weight, so it's good that you have fibery cartilage padding there at the knee joint to help protect the bones that are coming into contact with each other there. All right, cartilages are active tissues, and how do they grow when they need to grow? I mean, when you're a child and you're growing up through several years all the way to adulthood, obviously these different cartilages have to get larger. And again, the active cell types, your chondrocytes, are the active cell type in cartilage. They actually produce the extracellular matrix. So your chondrocytes secrete new matrix. They're also capable of undergoing mitosis. So when you need to grow a cartilage, you need to expand it in size. Chondrocytes that are inside the cartilage, as they undergo mitosis, they divide. That's going to expand the cartilage from within. That type of growth is called interstitial growth within. Now you can also grow cartilage around the edges. It can get wider and wider and wider and wider, and that's called appositional growth. Okay, so you have chondrocytes there along the external face of the cartilage that produce new matrix, new hyaline cartilage, or if it's a different type of cartilage, that type of cartilage's matrix there along the edges. That's called appositional growth. We'll see appositional growth also when we talk about bone growth, and that also refers to widening of the bones from the surface. Okay, at times cartilage can become calcified. Calcification just refers to hardening due to deposit of calcium within the cartilage. And that can occur for a couple of reasons. One, it can occur during normal bone growth and bone development. We'll see that hyaline cartilage plays an important role in that. And also as you get older, some of your hyaline cartilages can become calcified and will harden with old age. All right, so that was just a little overview of cartilage structure, since we'll be talking about the cartilages off and on, especially when we get into Chapter 8 on the joints. For the next video lecture, we're going to go back to our osseous tissues, or our bone tissue, and we've talked about their structures, and we've learned new terminology like epiphysis and diaphysis and medullary cavity and spongy bone versus compact bone. And now we're going to take a little more detailed look at what's going on inside the compact bone and the spongy bone, including the cell types that are there. You actually have active metabolizing cells that exist within that hard bony matrix of both compact and spongy bone. So we'll learn a little bit more about what's going on in those locations.